What's going on, guys? LordKing here again, back with another UFC preview show. UFC Nashville Tennessee, Swanson versus Lobov. I'm going to go straight into it as I feel it is not good to hang around. So first thing on the card, I haven't actually got all of the fighters up, mainly because I thought, again, normally what I do if you have seen these series is that I'm going to go over the ones that have almost an interest to me, but I'll pick out kind of and highlight the ones that could be good. Matt Schnell versus Hector Sandoval. Matt Schnell was on the Ultimate Fighter, and he showed to me that he's an incredibly sort of exciting fighter where he can be. He's actually coming off a loss in the Ultimate Fighter finale. So keep an eye out for that one. It's going to be a good sort of fight to start off the preliminary card on Fight Pass. Next up, we have Bryan Barberena, who's also taken my eye again, because again, it's quite nice to see him fight the gentleman who actually beat Sage Northcutt and Wally Alves. So if you're kind of unaware who those two are, they were pretty much maybe the two biggest prospects actually coming out of the whole UFC. Sage Northcutt being the clean-cut sort of blonde, muscular sort of gentleman, and Wally Alves meant to be hailed as almost like the next sort of Jose Aldo, quite a sort of upcoming figure, and he beat both of them on by submission and then decision, losing his most recent fight by decision to Colby Covington, who again is a very good fighter, quite a good wrestling sort of base. Still moving forward, I'm missing out these next three fights because, again, it's the ones that almost interest me the most, unless it's on the main card. Brandon Moreno versus Dustin Ortiz. Now, Brandon Moreno is one of my favourite sort of fighters, actually, almost currently in the UFC, to be honest. He's this very, very excited sort of small Mexican. He fights in the flyweight division along with Demetrius Johnson, if you saw in the previous review show or the last UFC. He's this very, very excited sort of Mexican guy. His nickname's the Assassin Baby, and he's just he does whatever the hell he wants, to be honest. He kind of just throws himself out there he's an underdog always, but he's a very, very exciting fighter. The vibe you just get from him is he's an incredibly nice sort of guy, even though I obviously don't know him, but he seems like a very, very lovely person, and he's got wins over Louis Smolka and Ryan Benoit. Louis Smolka being, well, that was quite a big upset, to be honest, and he won a performance of the night. He obviously was a champion in one of the other divisions, World Fighting Federation, but he is a very, very sort of solid fighter, so do look out for him. He's going to be going against Dustin Ortiz, who, again, is a relatively sort of accomplished fighter, but one thing I did notice is his wins that have actually come against very good people, but they've all been split decisions pretty much, or not necessarily the best things. I mean, if just by looking, the amount of split decisions he actually has on here is quite a hell of a lot, especially over Ray Borg, Justin Scoggins, and then Zach Mikowski, the most recent ones, over split decision. The ones he's actually lost have normally been by unanimous decision, and yeah, against the likes of Moraga, Benavidez, and Wilson Hayes, who recently lost to Formiga. So what this says to me is when he's kind of facing the upper echelon sort of people, even the likes of obviously Justin Scoggins and Ray Borg, he isn't necessarily the best sort of fighter. So I feel this could be Brandon Moreno's to maybe bump himself up in the rankings. So we'll find out on fight night. Thales Leites versus Sam Alvey, Smiling Sam Alvey. Now, also known as one of the, well, in my opinion, one of the odd sort of fighters to watch. He's always fighting with this very sort of peculiar smile on his face, hence the nickname Smiling. And then his post-fight interviews are something of legend, where he does this very theatric sort of... You need to see it, or if not, just type into YouTube Sam Alvey post-fight interview. He does this very theatrical sort of stage interview, and it's quite an interesting thing to sort of watch, to be honest. Looking at his record, he's done very, very well in the UFC, to be honest. Since he's been in the UFC, he's only lost 3 times. And the likes of Tom Watson, actually, one of the English sort of boys, Derek Brunson and Elias Theodorou, all 3 very, very good fighters. But wins over Eric Spicey, submission over Eric Spicey was incredibly impressive because Eric Spicey is a great jiu-jitsu artist. Kevin Casey, Alex Nicholson, and Nathan Marquardt recently in unanimous decision. Sam Alvey has got incredibly big sort of hands in the sense where he can punch very, very hard, and he couldn't put someone on the floor incredibly quickly. He's got 18 wins by knockout, so it almost says a fair about him. Thales Leites, now a relative getting a little bit older, but he is not necessarily to be disregarded. He is a good fighter and a great submission sort of artist. Since he's been in the UFC, he obviously started off winning quite a few fights, lost to Michael Bisping with a split decision, and now Bisping obviously is the current champion, so a split decision against Bisping shows kind of how good he is. Unanimous decision against Gegard Mousasi, someone who normally finishes people, and a unanimous decision against Krzysztof Jutko. So he's had a recent win over Chris Kamosi, which is, I believe, maybe one of his comeback sort of fights. But he is a good fighter, and like I mentioned, his ground game is very impressive. 15 wins via submission out of his 26. Almost says it, to be honest. But so look out for that. That could be an interesting fight, especially if it stays standing. Moving on to the main card, we're going through that quite quickly. It's quite nice. Going on to the main card, Jake Ellenberger versus Mike Perry. Now, Jake Ellenberger, I think it's fair to say he's coming towards the end of his sort of career now, but he's fighting a guy called Mike Perry, who is an absolute animal. The best way to describe it, he's a caged animal, and when he gets let out into the octagon, he pretty much lets loose. The only thing he's going to do is look to knock you out, and that's kind of what he does. He's a very uncut sort of person. He's not a clean-cut people like the people we see sometimes, but he is a very ruthless, sort of says it how it is, and will come straight for you. He's a very exciting sort of fighter as well. Most recently fought Alan Jouban. Alan Jouban sort of incorporated a nice sort of fight style where he kept a lot of distance and kept him away and landed his own shots when he needed to. But all his other fights have come by pretty vicious knockout. I think he's won. Yes, he's okay. So he won every single fight by TKO or KO, apart from the Alan Jouban fight, which kind of says how he fights, to be honest. Now he's going to be fighting Jake Ellenberger. So Jake Ellenberger, if you guys aren't aware, he is one of the, despite only being 32 to be honest, but he is kind of one of the veterans of the UFC. He's a very, very established sort of person. As you can see, 31-12. He's got a hell of a lot of experience, and he's respected, been in the UFC since 2009 and fought with Bellator briefly before. So he has incredible experience. He has fought almost absolutely everyone in that welterweight division. He came recently off a win to Matt Brown, which was quite nice to see, to be honest. Well, Matt Brown also maybe coming towards the end of his career as well, but it was nice to see Ellenberger get back on the winning train with the TKO, because not many people actually TKO Matt Brown, apart from maybe like Donald Cerrone did. Then losing to Jorge Masvidal via TKO after that. Again, Masvidal actually TKO'd Donald Cerrone, so it works in circles here. Ellenberger is a great fighter, and what I'm expecting is he's going to stand and trade with Mike Perry. So it could be quite an exciting sort of thing. As you can see, not too many of his fights go to actually decision. So I'm assuming he's going to stand with Mike Perry, and we could see some sort of sparks fly in this fight. The next fight up we have is Joe Lauzon versus Stevie Ray. Now Joe Lauzon he's one of my favourite fighters, to be honest. He always puts on a great performance, and he's very exciting to watch. Again, 32 years old. He has a ridiculous amount of post-fight awards, so being submission of the night, KO of the night, whatever it may be. He has so many of those actual awards where he's won money for afterwards, just because he is that sort of fighter. Now again, as you can see from his record, he has fought kind of everyone. He has lost quite a few times, but he's also won a hell of a lot as well. His ground game is phenomenal. His stand-up game is also phenomenal as well. He actually, well, UFC 200, everyone was kind of shocked when he actually TKO'd Diego Sanchez. As you all know, Diego Sanchez fighting on this card, but no one TKOs Diego Sanchez. Jim Miller, he lost a split decision. A lot of people thought he won. I thought it was a fight of the night. And then Marcin Held, oddly his most recent fight, he won by a split decision, but he actually said in the post-fight interview he thought he lost, and he said the win should have been for Marcin Held. So he's a very humble sort of person and quite valiant. He's a very noble person, to be honest. He's going against Stevie Ray. Stevie Ray, one of a Scotsman, an upcoming Scottish MMA fighter, who again has shown a hell of a lot of prospect, to be honest, only losing 6 times. Since he's been in the UFC, he's working his way up. Most recent win over Ross Pearson, who we all know Ross Pearson, one of the great sort of English fighters, but not in the top category of fighters in the division. So this Joe Lauzon fight is going to be the proper stepping stone, I feel, to almost decide whether Stevie Ray can move up into the next sort of category. This is his biggest test to date, and so it should be, to be honest, for a younger guy who's upcoming. Moving in again, John Dodson versus Eddie Wineland. Now, John Dodson, if you guys aren't too aware, he is he's an odd sort of character to look at. He's like an Energizer bunny, where he's this very small sort of gentleman, but he just doesn't almost run out of energy, and he's some people have hailed him. I think Joe Rogan actually hailed him as one of the most athletic sort of gentlemen in being in the UFC, whole of the UFC, where he is so small and compact, he is just so explosive and powerful. It's crazy. You see him doing backflips and things like that. He almost reminds me of like a mouse, but he's just really a pumped up sort of one. Showing again how good Demetrius Johnson is. Demetrius Johnson has beaten him twice, so it shows how good he is. But John Dodson was arguably the second best fighter in the flyweight division, now trying to come up to bantamweight and do a hell of a lot more up there. So looking into his record, he doesn't ever really turn down a fight, to be honest, and he wins a hell of a lot of them by TKO. He has incredibly fast and incredibly powerful hands. It's quite nice to see the sort of flyweights and the bantamweights getting recognition for knocking people out. He also went toe to toe with John Lineker. If you don't know who John Lineker is, people also say that he is the hardest hitting bantamweight ever to live, pretty much. So he went toe to toe with him and took a few of his punches as well. So he will stand and bang with his opponent, regardless of who it may be. But as mentioned, he has lost twice to Demetrius Johnson, who is, in my opinion, the best current pound for pound fighter in the world. So Eddie Wineland. Now Eddie Wineland was meant to be almost again hailed as this person that is upcoming and meant to be one of the biggest sort of prospects that was coming out of the UFC. As you can see, he fought in the WEC before the UFC. If you are unaware, the WEC was the sort of the lower divisions of weights, and then the UFC kind of merged with them, and then all those people became the lower divisions of weights in the UFC. So he's been pretty much in that sort of establishment for a long time now, and his losses coming to like Uriah Faber, Benavidez, Renan Barão, who was a former champion, Johnny Eduardo, and Brian Caraway. So all quite good sort of proven people. His most recent wins over Frankie Sayens and Takeya Mitsugaki. So again, he's an experienced sort of fighter, and he's 32 years old, but he has shown that sort of grit and determination to win. So again, this could be a very interesting fight, but I think I'm going to go with Dodson for that. Moving on again, Ovince St. Preux versus Marcos Rogerio de Lima. So now, Ovince St. Preux, if you are almost unaware of Ovince St. Preux, he recently lost one of his most recent fights, which I believe he actually won. But OSP Ovince St. Preux, he went 5 rounds with John Jones, which a lot of people didn't expect to happen in John Jones' comeback fight. And he kind of proved his worth a little bit until he then got viciously knocked out by Jimmy Manuwa. And then, like I mentioned, the sort of bad split decision afterwards to Volkan Ozdemir. So he's shown his worth. He is a very good sort of stand-up game. He's got a good sort of body kick. He's got a nice left hand, those sort of things. And he's an incredibly athletic person. He's fought countless times, and when he was younger, he was a American football player in his college. So again, to be that sort of level of athlete playing American football for your college he's a very good athlete, to put it as that. So we could see again maybe almost his comeback sort of fight here. Again, he's going against Marcos Rogerio de Lima, who is a little bit younger than him, 3 years younger, being 31. And again, what I see is almost a little bit of a not padded record, but his losses to the likes of Nikita Krylov, who's recently been put out of the, I think, top 10. So he's shown he can fight, and he's got a few submissions and TKOs. But I think this fight is more so for Ovince St. Preux to show that he can stay in that top sort of 8 to 5, that sort of category. So it's showing that he can stay in that sort of range, and this is going to be his almost maybe comeback fight as such to get back into that sort of range. It's going to be an interesting one, especially where De Lima fighting out of like the likes of American top team, how he's adapted since his last fight. So it'll be interesting to see. Again, overall, this main card is pretty incredible, to be honest. The rest of the card isn't amazing, but I'd probably say from Brandon Moreno versus Dustin Ortiz, the rest of the card is absolutely phenomenal. So going into the next one, Iaquinta versus Diego Sanchez. Now, Diego Sanchez, again, if you guys are familiar with the UFC and MMA, you should know who Diego Sanchez is. 35 years old, fighting out of Jackson Wink MMA with the likes of John Jones and such like that. But he has been fighting for God knows how long, and been doing it very, very well. So since he's been in the UFC, the Ultimate Fighter 1 was where he debuted, and that was in 2005. So as you can see, he's been around the block, and again, he fights with the most ruthless sort of style I think anyone had ever seen. If you haven't if you haven't seen him before, the first thing I would tell you to go look at is his fight versus Gilbert Melendez. I've just highlighted it on the screen there. My cursor is next to it now. His fight against Gilbert Melendez was one of the craziest sort of things I've seen in a hell of a long time. He did lose it, but it was he just came out with so much ferocity and pumping his chest up. It was crazy. You have to see it to know what I'm saying here. Most recent victory coming off a decision win against Marcin Held in November. So again, he lost to Joe Lauzon, as I mentioned. It was one of the first sort of times getting badly sort of TKO'd. So it can happen. Obviously, we have a doctor's stoppage, which isn't really a proper sort of TKO with BJ Penn. But I think it may have been the first time he actually got properly TKO'd by Joe Lauzon. So maybe his chin is deteriorating a little bit. But what we do know is that he is an incredibly good fighter. So now, our Iaquinta is a young sort of guy coming out of New York. He's not necessarily young. How old? He's 29 years old. So, but he's fighting out of Serra Longo's gym with the likes of Chris Weidman, Aljamain Sterling, with Matt Serra and stuff like that. So he was meant to be probably the most upcoming sort of fighter in these sort of divisions, beating like Ross Pearson, Joe Lauzon, Jorge Masvidal being put into that top category of the welterweights now, along with going to be fighting Damian Maia soon. So he's fought and beaten some of the best sort of people, but the problem arose when he was meant to, I believe it was UFC 205 against in New York, the Conor McGregor versus Eddie Alvarez card. He was due to actually fight Thiago Alves. Is there anything that confirms that? Yes. Quinta was expected to face Thiago Alves November 12th at UFC 205. But then there was some contract sort of disputes where he believed that he kind of wasn't being paid enough, to be honest. He wasn't just going to take the fight for the sake of it, because I believe they were just paying him a really insignificant amount, obviously with the likes of McGregor getting paid God knows how much for that card against that fight against Eddie Alvarez where he won both belts. So you can kind of see his frustration, to be honest. But so this is going to be his main kind of actual, almost a comeback fight. He hasn't fought, well, yeah, I didn't even realize he hasn't fought since April 2015. So pretty much 2 years now. So we'll find out if ring rust is actually a thing and how good he actually is. His potential has taken him over that time if he's still been training hard. And I suppose the best person to do that against is Diego Sanchez. Again, one of the most ruthless sort of intense fighters that is on the roster, UFC roster today. On to the final fight now. A quick note about this final fight, to be honest. I was a little bit frustrated when I found out this fight was happening. Cub Swanson, one of the most phenomenal fighters that's ever been in the featherweight division, recently coming off a victory against Dok Choi, which was maybe one of my favourite fights ever. It was probably the most back and forward fight I've ever seen. I don't think I sat down for the fight. It was ridiculously unbelievable. And he's fighting Artem Lobov. Now, if you don't know who Artem Lobov is, the best way to describe him, he is Conor McGregor's friend. With no almost disrespect to Lobov, but we can look at his record to give you a bit more of an insight into him. He's 30 years old and his record is 13-12. So he's won 13 times and he's lost 12 times. Now, the best way to describe it is I don't even think Artem Lobov is ranked in the top 15 in the featherweight division, whereas Cub Swanson, I believe he's ranked maybe 4th. So as you can see, there's a bit of controversy here, and a lot of people are complaining as to why he got this fight. And there's a few theories going around. The main reason is, one, because he's Conor McGregor's main sparring partner and training partner, so he is basically effectively his best friend. So people are kind of saying that's one reason, as because he knows him. The second reason is because, again, as I've mentioned before, the UFC is almost a talking game now, where it is relatively similar to WWE in the sense where, though when you talk, you get noticed. So Artem Lobov was causing quite a commotion. He kind of insulted Cub Swanson a little bit, and this was the fight they offered Cub Swanson. And not being stupid, Cub Swanson kind of accepted it. It's a main event slot on Nashville, Tennessee. Not a lot of people would not accept that when it's a main event slot. I kind of blame the UFC for actually offering this to Artem Lobov. I think it's a little bit disrespectful to Cub Swanson, being the situation where Cub Swanson, I expect him to win quite comfortably, and maybe by a KO or something. But Artem Lobov, again, MMA math is not a thing. Anyone can win at any time. So Artem Lobov is known for having some relatively sort of powerful hands, despite the fact he's only ever won maybe a few times by TKO. So he's won once there, twice, 3, 4. So he's won 4 times via TKO, and he claims to have the hardest sort of hitting hands in the featherweight division, which I kind of dispute a bit, obviously, with the likes of McGregor, Aldo, and even the Cub Swanson, Dok Choi in there as well. Most recent victories coming against Chris Avila, which is almost known as Nate Diaz's sort of protege. He beats him very unanimously. And Teruto Ishihara, who I believe fights out of American Top Team. This was... Artem Lobov was kind of dominating this fight, but then Ishihara did connect, and it would have been rather funny. He put him down on the ground, but Lobov did get up relatively soonish. Now, Cub Swanson, not too much needs to be said about him. He is actually fourth ranked in the featherweight rankings, and I don't think Artem Lobov is ranked at all. So now to go into his actual record, again, he's 24-7. He's fought almost everyone in the division. He's almost beaten everyone kind of in the division. So he's done very well. Obviously, previous losses a long time ago to the likes of Jose Aldo, to the current champion Chad Mendes, Stevens, Seaver, Poirier, Oliveira, Edgar, Holloway, and again the most recent win over Doho Choi, which, like I said, was one of the best fights I've ever seen. Yes, exactly. It actually won Fight of the Year 2016. So please go watch that if you haven't ever seen that before. Also watch the Diego Sanchez vs Gilbert Melendez fight. Those are the kind of the 2 setup ones. I will say this fight, I think, is going to go brutally to Cub Swanson. I think he's going to pick him apart and get maybe a TKO finish, but again, anything can happen in this world of MMA. Going quickly over my sort of picks for the night. We've got my performance of the night. I'm going to go with a Cub Swanson over Artem Lobov. I think our performance of the night. Finish of the night, I will go with Dodson. I think Dodson could do quite well. Also Mike Perry as well. I'll give those 2 to Mike Perry. And submission of the night, I shall say Joe Lauzon will submit Stevie Ray in quite a vicious fashion as such. Also, not to forget, Diego Sanchez is an incredibly good black belt on the ground as well, so keep an eye out for the likes of those. Actual winning people, Cub Swanson, I'm going to say Iaquinta will win this one, Ovin St. Preux will win, John Dodson will win, Joe Lauzon will win, and Mike Perry, I think, will win on the main card. Sam Alvey, I think, will win on the prelims, and Brandon Moreno was my other pick for that. And then Brian Barberena lower down. Going very quickly into betting odds, just over, as I didn't do this in the last one, I'm just going to pick out a few that I think could be some sort of good picks to bet on. This is Bet365, so a UK version. So I'm not sure exactly how this translates into Americans, but Brandon Moreno, like I mentioned, one of the what I think is a great upcoming sort of fighter and shown a hell of a lot of heart recently. So I'm picking him. He's 17-10, which makes him a relatively big sort of underdog. So again, take a look at that. Sam Alvey is kind of he's an evens at the moment, 10-11, which it may be again, I'm not really too sure, but to put it in American terms, they both have the same odds. So you guys can take away what you will. Diego Sanchez is 3-1, which is a huge underdog. So maybe put something on him because he could always get this sort of upset. As I'm not really too sure why Iaquinta is that higher favourite. Cub Swanson, Artem Lobov. As you can see, Artem Lobov is the biggest underdog on the card, I think. Artem Lobov, I cannot see him winning in any way whatsoever. Even if he lands incredibly hard shot, I think Cub Swanson may be able to take it after that, watching that previous fight. But again, chins can deteriorate, and he may not be able to take it. So this is always MMA math does not work, and Lobov could win, but I'll say Cub Swanson. So it's probably not worth betting on that because he's such a big favourite. Mike Perry, a slight favourite, probably a good choice. Even Ellenberger, quite a good choice again. Joe Lauzon is an underdog. I'd say pick him, in my opinion. Dodson is a huge favourite, and Ovin St. Preux is a slight favourite, so maybe go for him as well. That basically wraps it up, guys. Thank you very much for watching my UFC preview for Nashville Swanson vs Lobo. Please do tune into it this weekend, and look forward to some more Xenoverse videos, and also a Dragon Ball Super review coming up this week, and then also my UFC review coming up next week as well. So stay tuned for that, guys. Like always, like, share and subscribe, and thank you very much for watching. I've been LordKing. Thank you.